Hey everyone, it's Scott from SERPmedia.com. Today I'm going to be covering the SEOPress SEO plugin, and I will be covering the free version. SEOPress is another popular, it's actually a very rising popular SEO plugin that has both a free version and a pro version. Today we will only be discussing the free version, and I'll be giving you the general configuration that I would give for this plugin. So under the SEO section that's been added after installing SEOPress, you'll be given a nice admin panel that is filled with a bunch of junk that kind of looks a little annoying, but I'll live with it for now because we have to jump through the settings. So the notification center is going to warn you if there's anything that's majorly wrong with the website, and apparently also be used for their self-promotional services. So what this is it's your main dashboard to enable and disable features, and it allows you to easily access the rest of the features. We're not going to go through the installation wizard, but if you like, you can do so. I typically avoid installation wizards as I find they're too broad and they try to appeal to the general mass. And if you're here and watching this video, you want to know and get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and click on the first section, the titles and meta section. So very comparable to Yoast SEO. What this does is allows you to configure the auto-generated title tags and meta descriptions for various pages on your website. And unlike Rank Math, which is a competitor and another free plugin that I reviewed in another video, this is very, very streamlined. My gripe that I had with Rank Math SEO was it basically had options for the sake of options, and it was a little frustrating to say the least, and it was difficult to navigate. But under here, it's a lot easier. So you could set your separator, so you can enter, this is my separator, and you can choose your separator type. So, and then you can choose the site title. So the site title, because this is the home page, is site title. And then I would do something like the separator. And then I would do, and when you click more tags, you literally get all their tags. They're pretty much copied and pasted straight out of Yoast SEO. Not even kidding. That's basically what these features are. But what you can grab is the tagline or the site description. So the tagline is just the little bit of blurb that normally says just another WordPress site if you haven't changed it. And I want to make sure there's a space between it. So once this has been done, you'll go to your page and you'll see Gutenberg Playground, just another WordPress site. And if we put 1 at the end of it just to prove a point, now it's just another WordPress site 1. So now you know that it's actually working. The meta description tag allows you to either automatically generate one through a variety of sources. Again, with the homepage, they seem to recommend using the tagline. I wouldn't recommend that. You'll want to write something that's pretty descriptive of what your website's about. So on my own website, on SERPmedia.com, I have a nice little description. And it's, we are WordPress developers who love the nitty-gritty of back-end web development. We are based out of Nashville, Tennessee, and work with clients globally. That's a good meta description because it covers what it is that I'm trying to sell and who I am and what I'm trying to rank for. So you would want to write your own meta description right here that covers what you want. I would cut this out entirely and say whatever you'd like, and then go ahead and hit the save options. I'm going to leave it blank for the purpose of this video, but make sure you fill this out. Single post types. So this allows you to basically do the exact same thing on this page, but with different post types that are registered on the websites. Custom post types as well should register under here. So if you have a custom post type, this should appear under this section. So the post option allows you to hide SEO meta boxes for this post type. If you move this little widget, it will either enable or disable the SEO meta box on an individual per post or per page basis. I recommend leaving it on because you will want to fine tune it. And then we have the post title, which is a good thing to have, the separator and the site title. Those are pretty good things to have. For a post, you're typically just going to rewrite it anyways, but the defaults for that are perfectly fine, and that's what I would leave it as. And then it has post excerpt. What it'll attempt to do is generate an excerpt for the post if there isn't one set, by basically taking the first sentence or so and stripping out any HTML tags and making that the description. It's basically the same thing that Yoast SEO does. You can then choose to not display this post type in search results or do not follow links for this post type. You would want to leave them both on for both these default options. You can then choose to display the date in Google search results. I recommend using that for the post because you want to indicate when the post was written. And then you can display the post thumbnail in Google search results as well. I would try and enable that as well, at least for the post. I wouldn't try to do this for the Google custom search results for the page. And remember, this only works for Google custom search, which is not Google native search. Google native search will try to do this for you automatically. This is strictly for custom search. Archives. The archive section basically is just the default. The author archives, I recommend that your author archives are enabled for search results. It's a common thing that people do all the time is they don't include proper author archives, and so they don't bother indexing them. But an author archive can help establish authority for your website so long as you are not calling your author whatever your website is. So on my website, the author of the post is who the actual person is, which is in my case 99.9% of the time is me, Scott Hartley, and I have an author archive that shows who I am and how I relate to that post. You want to do the same thing, but if I had an author on that post labeled as SERP Media or SERP Media Staff, it wouldn't really generate much authority for me because it's not about me. It's not really me at all. It's for the company. So that isn't a really good way of doing it. That being said, you're also going to want to include the biography information for the author archive as the description. And this tag right here, author_bio, is what allows you to do so. This will only work for the meta description, and it will pull the biography data that you make on the user profile page. So we'll copy this and we're going to paste this right here. The content right here is more or less fine. One thing to keep in mind though is since this is an archive, what will end up happening is you'll have multiple pages in index. So you'll have page 101, page 102, so on and so forth. So just keep that in mind when you're making your titles is you'll want to include this target right here, which is the percent page. So typically what I like to do is Scott Hartley, that's the name of the author, and then a separator, and then typically I do page number just like that, and then if you want you can include another separator. So whoops, I included like 4 separators there. Well, I'm not going to delete them, but make sure you only include the single separator. Then there are date archives. Never index date archives. They're not good for search because most of the time if you're only publishing a single post a day, they're just not doing you any favors. In fact, in most situations, I disable date archives altogether. Search archives should also be no indexed because these are going to be returning search results and you don't want those to be ranking. You don't want to have a bunch of random query strings with a bunch of results to your actual content in search results. So no index your search result pages as well. And then the 404 archives are not going to index anyways, and you don't really need to include a meta description for them because it doesn't matter. Then there are the taxonomies. So the great thing about SEOPress is it automatically adds basically the usefulness of the correct archive. So current pagination and the category description, tag description, these are basically perfect. I would not change anything about these setups. And then advanced. So the advanced tag allows you to enable a couple of options, some of which are pointless. For instance, the no ODP doesn't matter. The Open Directory project doesn't exist anymore, so this is not useful. No index would allow you to no index all pages of the site, which is pretty useless more or less. You can choose the no archive if you don't want Google to cache the pages, but there's no real reason to do that. You can also choose to not have the site link search box functionality, but you would want to do that. So more or less, you don't really need to mess around with any of these options because most of them are just not useful. The only thing I would make sure is that the last option is indeed checked because it should be. We're then coming up on the XML and HTML sitemaps. So more or less an HTML sitemap is not as important as it used to be. Some people still like to include them though. So if you like it and you like having a page, maybe you don't even call it your sitemap page, but if you include that nice page that users can click to navigate your post, then by all means you can enable this, but this is not useful for an SEO, for a real world SEO functionality. But you can enable the author sitemap, which I recommend because we have it set to index like it should. What you'll do then is you'll save, and then you can click view your sitemap. And in theory, this works. If it doesn't though, we're gonna hit flush permalinks, and there we have it. So it basically looks like every sitemap ever. It includes the post, the page, the category, and the author. And then if you click here, you get your post sitemap, and it takes you to your post. One thing is, as I mentioned, is it enables an images sitemap. If you have an image uploaded as a featured image, it will create a dedicated sitemap for that. There's a lot of debate whether you really need to have images in their own sitemap or not. My typical recommendation is the Yoast SEO implementation makes the most sense to me, where if it's in the post, then it's also included in that sitemap for the post, because that just makes sense. There's no reason to split it off like that. But otherwise, these are typically my recommended settings. You don't need an HTML sitemap. It's just not necessary. Post types. So choose the post types to include. You should never include attachment post types, as it says. If you allow attachments to be indexed, what will happen is you'll get a bunch of pages in Google search results returning for a specific image. So it'll basically be a blank page with the image on it. There will be no text, no text added. It's not a useful form of content to index. So never check this option. These first two options though are correct. For taxonomies, again, make sure that these are checked. And then had you enabled the HTML sitemap, you could do so, but we're not going to because there's no reason to have an HTML sitemap. The social networks tab is very similar to the Yoast SEO settings, but there are some additional options. So you can configure knowledge graph data, which is very similar to setting the organization in Yoast SEO, where you either set the name of a person or the organization. So if your website is about a company, like certmedia.com, set the organization. If it's scotthartley.blog, then I would make it a person. In this case, you would just name an organization, and I would call this Gutenberg Playground. You'll want to include an image. I don't recommend using GIF formats for this, just a personal gripe, but a PNG or a JPEG logo would be perfect. If you have an organization and you have an active phone number, you have to include the internationalized version. So if you're in the US, it's +1. And then you'll write out your whole phone number. This is good for just generating knowledge graph information. Then you can choose the contact type of what that phone number is. If you don't know, the general catch-all would be customer support that you'd want to put there. If you're a one-man business, I would just put customer support. Contact option, you can choose if it's toll-free. So if you have an 800 number, you can put that here. If the hearing impaired is supported, which if you would know if your phone is or not, but for 90% of use cases, the none option works. And the best part is you don't need to include any of this data for it to be valid. The only thing that really matters is including the name of the organization and the organization logo. That's what's going to be required. This is just bonus supplemental information. So if you have an organization without a phone number, don't stress, you don't need to add it. You certainly shouldn't make one up. You can then choose to include a Bespoke Admin ID, which can be that of a person or an app that you have registered in Facebook, but you don't need to do this. The only options that I would really recommend doing are the thumbnail and the ownership. Facebook oftentimes tries to tell you that they require you to have a app ID when working with Open Graph data in the structured tool that they have. You don't need to have an app ID. The only things that are really required are to include the default image, and that's not even really required, that's just a best practice. And then I would recommend including the ownership ID. You technically don't need to fill any of this out, but I recommend including the first two options. Then you have Twitter card. So one thing that I like is with Twitter card data, you can also choose to use the Open Graph data if there are no Twitter cards filled out. I recommend doing that. I also setting the image summary size to large so that we have a larger image, which tends to have higher click-through rates. And then just make sure you have a default Twitter image in the event of there not being one. And then as always, make sure you hit your save button. Now the other thing about SEOPress is it allows you to enable Google Analytics tracking. but I personally am much more of a fan of Google Sitekit, which I will be doing another video on. Finally, you have the advanced options. So let's talk about these options. The first thing is you want to make sure that you're redirecting attachment pages to the file URL. There's no reason to redirect attachments to post if it can redirect to the actual attachment itself. You can then choose to remove reply to com link to avoid duplicate content. Not so much important. You can also choose to automatically set the image title and alt data by converting the text on the file name. Now, they recommend using an image SEO plugin, which will try to use AI to automatically figure out what the image is and label it. But if you'd like, you can just by default generate this data by the file name. Now, for this to work properly, you have to properly be naming your files. If you upload a bunch of files called unnamed.jpg, and I see that all the time, this will do nothing for you. I'm still a fan of writing my own meta descriptions and title tags. But if you're somebody who already has a large website, you haven't been doing SEO for a while, this might help you. But if you haven't been doing SEO and you haven't been keeping it in mind, chances are this isn't going to do much for you because you didn't set the names of the images to be useful anyways. But if you're of the 1% who have set proper image names but didn't bother to set title and alt text information, then check these options. You can then automatically set the image caption as well. I don't recommend doing that. And then automatically set the image description, which they're just extra fields, and I wouldn't bother with these for 90. I would actually just never do this. Your file name is almost never going to be a good means of a caption or a description. Just don't do it. You can also choose to add the WP editor to the taxonomy text area. Now you might be wondering, what does that mean? Well, if you edit the uncategorized, for instance, you see how this description menu here exists and it looks just like editing a post pre-Gutenberg. If you save, uncheck that option, it's basically just a blank editor. And the reason for this is it tends to strip out data. Most people tend to call the contents of it directly, and then they filter it to just get raw text. But having this here is very useful if you're somebody who's writing a more complicated description and you want to make use of things such as bolds. You can remove the category URL in permalinks. I don't recommend doing this. It doesn't make any sense to me, and it definitely doesn't make sense from a user perspective. You can remove the WordPress generator tag. Sure, why not? There's no harm in doing it. I'd recommend just doing it. You can choose to disable trailing slashes for metas. So if the structure of your permalinks does not contain a slash at the end, you can disable the trailing slash that's enforced. What that basically means is if you go on here and I click on Hello World, as you can see, the end URL has a final slash, which is known as a trailing slash. It's not useful. I don't recommend using it. You can choose to remove the hentry post class from Google. Seeing the structure data, you should probably just leave it on there. It's useful for Google to have that data. You can choose to remove the author URL in comments if the website is filled from the profile page. I say it's fine to leave that. Remove the WordPress short link meta tag. If you have the short link meta tag enabled, you can go ahead and disable it here. This is really just quick things to clean up the header. It's not going to make that big of a difference. And then you can also verify your tags right here for Bing, Google, Pinterest, and Yandex. It does not support Baidu at this time. Under the appearance section, you could then make additional options that are mostly just for you. So you could customize SEOPress to, as it says, fit your needs. What I say is you should remove the admin bar from the back end because it's just clutter. And then you can choose to remove it move the meta box to be a high priority, which means it'll be higher to the top, or a low priority, which means it'll be towards the bottom. To show you what I mean, the high priority is what allows this box to appear up here instead of appearing below other boxes that I could enable, such as revisions. So that's a good thing to have. You could choose to hide the notification center in the SEOPress dashboard. I'm going to do that because I know what I'm doing, and after you set this up, you really shouldn't need to do that. You can then also choose to hide the SEO tools in the SEOPress dashboard. We'll get there in a minute. The useful links can also be hidden. It's fine, we're disabling the notification center. We chose to show the meta description in the post types column. What this means is when you come over here, the meta description option is enabled. Depending on the complexity of your website and how many fields you have enabled here, you're going to want to micromanage them through screen options. but you can already uncheck these in the screen options, so there's not really any need to do this here. I would skip all of these because you don't need to change them. Then you can also choose to show the W3C column to check code quality. I'm going to show you what this option does because it's just something interesting. You enable this option, and you come over here, and you can do a W3C check. Now, it sounds like it's going to help you, but all it does is it takes it and then it runs it through the W3C validator. It's just a link. It's not useful by any means. It's interesting because it feels like it should be performing that in the back end and pulling that data in, but it's just a link. You can then choose, if you're running a Genesis site, to remove the SEO meta box and the SEO settings link. Genesis should already be compatible. If it's not, they're probably going to be compatible and disable their settings for this plugin. And then the final option is under security, which basically just allows you to manage which roles can modify the content and the SEO settings. Finally, there are the tools section, which basically just allows you to export the settings, reset the plugin, and then to migrate. So if you had another SEO plugin installed, this will allow you to easily migrate that data into SEOPress. The reset allows you to totally reset the warnings and the notification center if you wish, but we've turned that off because it's just clutter. Or you can export your plugin settings. If you've done a broad configuration like I have for the sake of this website, and you're a webmaster who manages multiple clients, this allows you to easily deploy settings across their sites. But you have to remember, if you wrote a custom meta description under the titles and meta tags, and you included the social networks, then you're also going to be importing those. So you want to make sure that if you're exporting the settings for the use of a different site, that you didn't add data that was specific to the site that you're exporting the data from. Other than that, that's all the settings. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through an example post to show you what it means to work with and edit SEOPress. So SEOPress is fairly interesting with its recommendations. The one thing I have to say that I'm going to gripe about already, though, is it's really, really long. The content analysis is just you just scroll, and it's not streamlined like Yoast SEO or All-in-One or any of the other SEO plugins till this point. I really wish this area was cleaned up a little bit. It just has so much stuff in the least efficient manner. But here's what I do like. I like the fact that the snippet preview is always visible, and I like that they make clear cut, okay, you're using 51% of the total length that you can have, and it measures it in pixels. It's addition to just character counting or just giving you a blank bar. It's good to have that other information, but more or less, if you have a good signal from what this bar is, then it doesn't matter. So if I paste this in here and I paste it a second time, now what we know is, okay, now here's how you know something that's interesting. As you can see, I'm using 944 pixels out of 940. The reason that that matters is because even if you're under the character limits, Google search results may still truncate the content because it's too wide. So you may, if you've ever used Yoast SEO, you may write a description, but it still gets shrunk in Google even if it's green, and that's because that it's too wide. Characters that like a W take up 10 pixels worth of space, but an A only takes 8. So there's useful data in there because people make this mistake all the time, and it's very hard, and Yoast SEO doesn't really help you too much with figuring that out. And that's where SEOPress does a really good job, is in this editor, is it gives you the clue of, okay, you may be in the character limit, but you're not wide enough. Now, one important note is the meta descriptions and title tags can be fluid. If Google determines that your meta description is longer and that it's useful to be long and that it likes that it's 3 sentences long, for instance, they will keep that. But if it's not, in most cases, they will shrink it. But you basically have to gamble on whether they're going to take your extra long meta description or not, because it's truly up to them. And there was a point where that was the standard for a few months, and then they changed it back, and everybody rewrote their meta descriptions, and it was just chaos, and it wasn't very nice. Now, we're going to put a keyword in and we're going to call it WordPress. There we go. Had to get the capital P in there. And you're going to click refresh your analysis. Now, again, what this does is allows you to get quick analysis of your page as far as optimizations, the configuration, the images, and everything else. We're not going to be too worried about this, but we're just going to fill out okay, so I have a decently long title and I have a decent meta description, and I pasted the text in there, and it tells me my text isn't long enough. But what we're trying to get at is, does this plugin actually make you a better writer and do better SEO? The fact that the titles and the meta descriptions include pixel counts is very useful. Under the advanced section, you can choose to basically disable it from various indexes and archives, but I wouldn't mess around with this option too much. You could set a different canonical URL, and I believe it also supports a third-party URL. So say you copy an article from one of your other websites and you paste it on there. To avoid getting hit by a duplicate content warrant issue, you should put the third-party canonical URL in there to declare, okay, while this is appearing on this website, it was written by and originally appeared on this website. One thing that you can do also is set the primary category. So what this does is allows you to set the category that, as it mentions, gets used in the category permalink if you have multiple categories. Yoast SEO does something similar, but it also makes sure that that's the primary category used in your breadcrumb list. As far as I can tell, this free version has no sort of breadcrumbs. Under the advanced section, we've gone through everything. Under the social settings, you can manually configure the Twitter and Facebook card data. You don't need to do this unless you're trying to target a different type of user, or you're trying to optimize it for different followers on different platforms. The final option is actually really awesome, and I'm glad they include this in their free version, is the redirection tool. What this allows you to do is you can redirect a post to another URL. Now you might be wondering, why on earth would you ever do this? I haven't figured that out quite myself either, but I like that it's there. If you have to delete content, or the content existed at one point, it would make sense to mark it as, say, a 410 and say that this is gone, it's never coming back. And you could choose to put it to your 404 page or your home page, which this is great. I just wish that it wasn't on this screen. I love having redirection tools built into SEO plugins because it makes sense. Having proper redirects, not just lazily redirecting all 404s to your home, is really important for an SEO strategy. However, only being able to manage it in the post defeats the purpose entirely, because what happens is if you have a redirect for content you've already deleted, you're kind of SOL unless you recreate the page with that URL. So I love that this is here. I just hate that it's in the post editor. And it clearly wasn't visible in the SEO section as a tab called redirection. So I'm not overly joyed that it's here, but I'm glad that it's here. At least it's here somewhere in the plugin. So let's just take a quick look now into the content analysis and its recommendations. Now that we've gone through the SEO box, the content analysis is what's going to tell you if your page is optimized. And I always have to put air quotes around it because recommendations are broad. And every SEO plugin has different suggestions from one another. None of them share the same recommendations. So you're really just trying to place your money with whoever wrote the plugin to say that they know what's best. And they all have a bit of grain of truth from them, but none of them are perfect. So let's look at what these general suggestions are. Word counts. The text is too small. I agree. You should add more content. I typically tell people who are trying to write posts, you should do 300 to 500 words as your minimum, because it's a good amount of text. There are times when you physically cannot write that much about a topic, which is acceptable. But it's unacceptable to have a topic that you can write a lot about and to be writing a lazy post that only includes 200 words because you're not getting your point across well enough then. The keyword density is, everybody debates whether keyword density matters. My thought is a specific percentage doesn't matter, but having the keyword in your article makes sense. So don't go trying to stuff keywords in there by, let's say you're writing about Scott Hartley, and I say, and then he is speaking about Scott Hartley in the third person, and then he went to the grocery store. And now if you're keyword stuffing, you could go, and then Scott Hartley went to the grocery store, and then I could follow it up by, and after Scott Hartley went to the grocery store. You could just sound really repetitive where it isn't grammatically incorrect, but it just doesn't sound necessary. So avoid keyword stuffing. Keywords in your permalinks. Your permalinks should typically include the keyword that you're trying to rank for, because it's also typically going to be in the title. The heading 2, they recommend including a heading 2 and heading 3 tag. This isn't applicable to all types of posts. It depends on how you're structuring your content, and sometimes content that you're writing about doesn't have to drill down one specific point into the level of an H3. The meta title, it recommends that you write a custom meta for this post. That was already done, so we're going to refresh this analysis. Okay. It looks like it's not getting the memo. Okay. No custom meta description is also set for this post. Very interesting. Open Graph title, it found a title and a description, but it didn't find an image, and that's because there was no featured image set. A featured image should be set for your post to automatically fill out this data, and it basically tells you everything else is in the green. I'm not overly thrilled so far with these recommendations. The reason for this is so far the optimizations have been pretty pointless, other than making sure that you don't stuff keywords where they don't belong. The configuration is basically all green because you didn't check on any of the boxes that were in the SEO settings. So effectively everything in the advanced section, if you were to check it, would result in having a red check mark in the configuration, which makes you wonder what's the point of having those options in the first place. But I digress. Under the images, it says that no alternative text was found for these images. I have no idea where it found that image. It probably grabbed it actually from the comments section, and it did. So the problem with this recommendation right now is by default, comment avatars don't include alt tags in WordPress. They just don't. The images should only be read from the featured image in the content of the post. It shouldn't just scan the entire page for images that are missing alt tags. Because when you're writing content, you want to make sure that your alt tags that you're writing for are the ones that should be optimized, are the ones that you're actually including in your post. There's many times when images may come up that are just not going to be necessary to have alt tags for. I wouldn't be surprised if under certain configurations that background images falsely get flagged for this. I wouldn't be surprised, but there might be a scenario. I'll have to test it later to see if I can get it to false flag a background image under this recommendation where you physically can't add alt tags. But this is not a good recommendation. It should exclude the comment gravatars. This should not be flagged. And then it recommends under the links. Okay, this page doesn't have any no-follow links. That is not inherently bad for SEO. We found 4 links that are no-follow within your page. Do not overuse no-follow attribute links. And they're all ones that are from the comment section. So this is, again, more nonsense that should be taken out and fixed. When you're writing content, again, you want to make sure that you're getting recommendations about the content you're writing, not about how the site is built. This link suggestion is for the comment section, which is incredibly confusing for the user. It's also not completely accurate. Having no follows for URLs in your website isn't inherently bad. And it certainly isn't bad to no-follow external links. It is bad to no-follow all external links. My typical recommendation when you're using no-follows is you should only no-follow URLs under 2 scenarios. Number 1, it's a referral or an advertisement. So if you're selling, maybe you wrote a post about some kind of toaster on Amazon, and you put a referral link to it from the Amazon affiliate program, so that way you can get some money when they click the link and buy it. That's a perfect scenario to no-follow because you don't want to be sending PageRank to a product under a referral link. It doesn't make sense. You should also no-follow it if you honestly don't trust the source of the content or it seems incredibly unreliable. You don't want to associate your website with websites that you honestly can't trust and they don't look good. So if you're writing a post, you see this all the time in the medical industry particularly, where links could be made to, I'm going to call them sketchy blogs, and you could use this to your advantage, where you're writing a post about an analysis of somebody else's website. So say you read an article about some medical procedure on some random guy's blog who's clearly not an expert, but you need to highlight what you're referencing from them. You can include the link and then no follow it. That would be a good case, because you clearly can't trust the source. They're clearly not reliable, but you're trying to correct the wrong that they did with their poor content. That's a good case of when using a no follow for an outbound link. But one thing that I see all the time, and I have to tell people, if you do this, you're shooting yourself in the foot technically, is no following all external links. You should only no follow external links when you can't trust them or they're just an advertisement effectively. So I'm not pleased with the recommendation. So far, I'm not really pleased with this content editing experience, in all honesty. And when I was testing this plugin prior, I ran into the same issues where I loved this editor. I liked that it included the pixel count, because that's something people don't even know about most of the time. But then you get down to the recommendations, and the optimizations are honestly pointless. They would have been better copying them straight out of Yoast SEO. The configuration, this could not exist, and you wouldn't even know, because all it tells you is basically don't touch this entire section. You could then also choose, you could go to the image section. Oh, hey, your image doesn't have an alt attribute. That's good. Oh, but it's an image from a gravatar. And the gravatar is not something you can easily control anyway, so I don't think that works. Or the links. The links are flagging the comment links. These are things that should only be flagging in the content, but they're flagging content outside of your actual post, which just isn't good. And then we have the issue of this refresh analysis doesn't appear to be working for the meta and description tag. I'm going to click update and to see what happens real quick. And I'm going to refresh this URL. And now it works. So it honestly kind of looks like this doesn't appear to be working, which is another issue that I may file a bug report on. So I'm not in love with this plugin. There are things that it does right. I kind of like its user interface, to be honest. It feels very nice, modern, and fresh. I don't like this post editing experience at all, but we've gone through everything you really need to know, and we've gone through the good and the bad in this plugin. This right here, genius. Whoever thought to include this, genius, because I see this happen all the time. I've done this. I do this a lot even, where I'll test it in Yoast SEO, and then I'm like, why is it being shrunk? And I'm like, oh, I'm over the pixel count, and then I have to go through and fix it. So this is genius. I love this part here. I love this. I hate this section. It needs to be reworked. I feel like this could be condensed a little bit more. I wish this redirection tool was in its own tab somewhere where it should be. And pretty much the entire optimization section, I'm not a fan of. I can't get behind it. A lot of the recommendations seem pointless. They don't apply to every article. And this, I think, is broken. If you have a question about it, any of this plugin, feel free, and I will help you to the best I can. Don't, just because I don't like it doesn't mean you can't like it. And if you're already using it, don't feel like you have to change. An SEO plugin will only get you so far. Good content and good structure will get you a lot farther. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.